Transmitter device activated. Coordinates set for Earth 2.
Hello and welcome to the Earth 2 podcast, the show that navigates the pre-crisis DC Comics multiverse and celebrates the legacy of their Golden Age characters throughout the Silver and Bronze Ages of comics. I'm Steve Higgins.
I'm Peter Watson.
And I'm David Steele. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. We three, etc. Yes, welcome back. Woohoo! Welcome back, Peter. Welcome back, Steve. Three of us haven't recorded together since we did Planet of the Capes in Jimmy Olsen issue 117, I think it was.
Yep, our 100th episode.
Ooh.
Our 100th episode, yes. So,
yep.
Obviously, Steve has appeared in many episodes since, and he's recently been assisting me as we cover the Spectre's adventures in Weird Adventure Comics. And this week, we're doing the lead story from issue 116 of Brave and the Bold. So I thought it'd be great if we all liaised and the three of us did it together. That was quite a fun idea of mine, wasn't it?
Yay!
It was.
Yes.
And it wasn't a problem to schedule in the slightest.
No, it was actually quite straightforward once we got on with it and thought about it. B&B 116, published on the 17th of September 1974, 4 days after the second birthday of Matt Everett, the drummer of Menswear, and latterly the drummer for the Montrose Avenue. Peter's going to tell us about the cover.
We're still in the DC 100 pagers, folks. DC 100 pages for only 60 cents at the top. The Brave and the Bold, number 116, January, and it's approved by the Comics Code Authority.
Thank heavens for that.
Yes. And you might be surprised to find out that the team up in this particular issue is Batman and the Spectre.
Gasp.
Ooh.
What are the chances?
And because it's a 100-pager, it reprints many, many stories, so I'll go over them first before we get to the main event. We have, down the right-hand side, the Teen Titans in The Dimensional Caper, which is a story that we covered way back.
Yes, I can't remember which episode number that was, about 2 and a bit years ago. That was a very messy recording, wasn't it? We kept adding bits to it and deciding we should probably do this, and I couldn't read my notes, so I went back and rewrote my notes and recorded them separately, and you can totally tell that was a messy one.
It was the zany, haney dialogue that kept throwing us, and of course Aqualad in his Scottish accent.
Yes.
Sorry, Aqualad in his Atlantean accent, his authentic Atlantean accent.
That's right. There was not a moment when he wanted to eat some hot dogs or something, or was that just me?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Who could forget the classic hot dog scene from Dimensional Caper?
Exactly. Listeners, I would encourage you to scroll back down to Instagram and see if there's any panels of Aqualad and some hot dogs. You never know. No, that was great, because we didn't just do that issue, we did 2 or 3 others at the same time that all fit in together and stuff. There was a Hawk and Dove.
Yep, all the Dimension X stuff, yeah.
Yeah, an epic. Listeners, I may well post a link to this episode on our socials at some point this week as a wee reminder. I'm sure I will. Keep your eyes peeled for that.
Also in this issue, we have a reprint of The Coils of the Copperhead, the story in which Batman, Batgirl and Wonder Woman team up to fight Copperhead, the snake-themed villain who will feature much later on in the podcast when we cover Secret Society of Supervillains.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. I was going to ask.
Hey.
Yeah, that was issue 78, I think, of B&B.
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
And other features in this issue are Robot Man, Dead Man, and The Silent Knight. But we're not talking about any of those stories. We're talking about the Spectre story. The main image in the cover is New Grasp of the Killer Cult. We're in some sort of temple, mausoleum, or something like that. There's a brazier in the background burning away. There is a statue. It appears to be a statue. It's certainly a big stone-like figure of Kali, the god. And it's adorned with human skulls all over it. It's very scary. It has 4 arms. Must be forewarned. That's good.
Yes.
And one of the arms, it's holding a curved dagger that is about to plummet down into the chest of Batman, who it's holding on one of his other arms. Batman's arching his back backwards, desperate to try and get away. But fortunately, phasing through the wall, we have the figure of the Spectre.
Yes. Spectre to the rescue. Listeners, we'll pay close attention for that scene when it happens during the story. I'll probably end up talking about Defenders issue 39 again. So obviously, listeners, given that Steve has been assisting me recently in the Spectre stories, we thought it'd be fun for Steve to join us for this issue of B&B featuring the Spectre. Who's playing Batman? Is it going to be Steve or is it going to be Peter? You'll find out very soon. The story begins, but before the story, there's a very interesting splash page at the very start of the comic, which lists the whole credits for the issue. And there's a nice composite image that shows the Spectre and Batman almost together now. I've done some poking about, and the image of Batman is actually from the cover of issue 92 of Brave and the Bold, which featured Batman and the Bat Squad. And the picture of the Spectre is taken from the splash panel of issue 435 of Adventure Comics, which Steve and I covered very recently. It's the one with the cover with the Spectre coming out of the oil lamp to attack the man, and the girl tied to a chair behind, which obviously closely replicates the scene from within that issue. There's a bit of trivia for you then, listeners, if a pub quiz question ever comes up and asks you where the images of the Spectre and Batman on the splash panel for Brave and Bold issue 116 came from, you can now tell them. Obviously, we'll put this image on the socials so you will see it at some point. So the story begins. A caption sets the scene.
Night, and the moon stares down like a glassy eye at an eerie and startling scene.
Yes, take a drink immediately, listeners, because there's a full moon. What we see in the foreground, there's a sort of truck, by the looks of things, with a door open at the back, and a man in a brown suit hurling a pickaxe at Batman. Looming out of the trees in the background is the Spectre. He looks appalled. It almost looks as if he's reaching to try and catch the pickaxe. I hope he does. We'll have to pay attention and see if this scene pops up in the story. Given some of the recent Spectre stories we've done, there's a bit of a precedent for that not happening. The captioning continues.
From nowhere they come, terrifying, faceless assassins who strike their victims without warning. Amazingly, even the great Batman is powerless against them. Enter the Spectre, figure of mystery, and the menace multiplies as an entire city writhes in the
grasp
of the killer
cult. Fantastic. And we're told the story has been brought to us by
Bob Haney and Jim Aparo.
Fantastic, yes. Bob Haney on art duty this month, which is quite interesting. Well, that's a lie. Page 2 of the story is a caption top that says Part 1, and I suppose the chapter title, called
Streets of Fear.
The caption then for panel 1 reads,
Gotham City, 8 million souls struggling and toiling for money, glory, or sheer survival.
Yes, nice view of the city in daylight, unusually. We see a speech bubble coming from a tall skyscraper. It's someone's secretary. We hear her saying, Mr. Jennings, we'll see you now. And in panel 2, we see Mr. Jennings sat at his desk. He's an older man, heavily balding, very neat dark moustache. He wears glasses, and standing in front of him wearing a black suit and a black tie with a red stripe and close cropped white hair. He reminds me of Manhunter 2070, quite frankly.
Yes.
This man is standing in front of Mr. Jennings, and Mr. Jennings is reading a business card, which we can see says something like Rokeby Cordage Company, rope for all uses, something like that. Anyway, Mr. Jennings is saying to the man in the black suit,
Come in, Weaver, but I should warn you I'm not in the market for rope or cord right now.
I'm sure you'll change your mind when you see my latest samples, Mr. Jennings.
And with emphasis in panel 3, we see that Mr. Weaver has taken a cord out of the briefcase that he had under his arm, and he has a very shifty expression in his face all of a sudden. In the next panel, we see Mr. Jennings looking very panicked as he yells,
No!
We see the silhouette of the cord looming ominously. The next panel, we presume it's Mr. Jennings' secretary, sat at her desk as Mr. Weaver takes his exit. The secretary says, How do you do, Mr. Weaver?
Afraid your boss isn't in a buying mood, but you can't win 'em all. Bye now.
And the next panel is a shot of, well, it's Mr. Jennings, sat at his desk, his glasses drooped down over his face, his eyes wide and staring. His secretary can be heard entering the room, and she says, Mr. Jennings, should I take that dictation now? And then she sees the state of her boss, and she screams, Eek! This takes us to the top of page 3, where a caption reads,
8 million souls in the throbbing city, struggling for glory or sheer survival. And, at the Gotham Racket Club, refuge of the rich and successful...
Yes, we see a couple of men playing tennis. One chap in a blue shirt, one guy in a white shirt with green shorts. This is Mr. Forbes and Mr. Walters. Mr. Forbes has just missed the ball, and he exclaims,
Ah, missed it. Nice shot, Walters. Let's knock off for a drink in my private cabana.
The next panel, it's a wider shot of the whole area. It looks very nice, very sunny. A couple of voices coming from the cabana. The first one, of course, being Walters. We hear him say,
Some setup you have, Forbes. A private phone, too.
Hey, Walters, what are you doing? You ripped the phone off the wall?
We have a slow dissolve. A caption reads,
Shortly...
And we see a couple of men in the foreground, obviously chatting about tennis and important things. One guy in a yellow shirt, one guy in a blue shirt, and we see Mr. Walters taking his exit in the background, saying,
Mr. Forbes is resting in his cabana and asked not to be disturbed. See you sometime.
To which the guy in the yellow shirt says, Glad to have you as a guest here, sir.
Sometimes a refuge is not a refuge, and sometimes playtime is over. Forever. An hour later...
Yes, the lad in the yellow shirt, who we presume now works at the establishment, has opened the door to Mr. Forbes' cabana. Mr. Forbes' cabana! I think that was in Talking Pictures the other night, wasn't it? He's opened the door to Mr. Forbes' cabana and he sees Mr. Forbes lying on the ground. Significantly, we can see in the foreground the handset of a telephone where the cord has obviously been snapped and formed into a loop. As he's entering the cabana, the staff member is saying, "Mr. Forbes, you ready for that tennis lesson?" And then he sees the body on the floor and he yells, "Good God!" Another slow dissolve and another caption.
Gotham City. 8 million souls in search of fame and escape.
Our next panel shows a man with a very unusual face. Look at the jawline on that laddie. Curly hair, he's wearing a blue suit, an orange tie, and he appears to be in some sort of establishment, shall we say, some sort of maybe nighttime establishment, because standing in front of him is a very pretty blonde lady, wearing a sort of, shall we say, belly dance outfit, not much else. She's holding a couple of silk scarves in her hand, and she's saying, "You don't look much like a talent scout, Mr. Valentine, but I'll show you my act. Lola Lalana and her scarf dance, even if the club's closed for the night." First panel, page 4, we see Lola giving it loudy, as we say in Scotland. Scarves twisting around as she dances, and she says, "I'm dying to leave this joint for a better booking." And then we see that Mr. Valentine seems to be reaching for one of the scarves, as he says,
"You don't have to leave to die."
Who needs subtlety? Who needs nuance? Do you know what I mean?
I like how you've got me down as the three killers. Cheers.
Well, hey, I could have put you down as the three women.
All right. Mix it up a bit. Anyway, right, okay.
You always, I have it in my head, was it Tony said at the time that you hated playing the women or something?
Oh, no, that's fine. It's okay. Anyway, right.
Now that you've said that, if there's any women in any of the stories, then mate. Right, anyway. There is another slow dissolve and another caption.
It is a little later.
Yes, we see poor Lola lying on the floor of the club. Janitor standing nearby with his mop. A couple of police officers, one kneeling down examining her body. And also on the scene, wearing a very smart purple jacket, is Commissioner Gordon, and also the Caped Crusader himself, Batman. Commissioner Gordon is saying,
3 homicides by strangling in Gotham this week, but they all seem to be unconnected.
Batman holds up the scarf that probably strangled poor Lola in the next panel, saying,
"Or maybe all connected, Commissioner Gordon, by a cord of circumstance."
How, Batman? A businessman, a playboy, and a nightclub dancer? None of whom knew each other. How could there be a connection between them?
Besides the way they died, strangling, each suspected killer is a solid citizen, including the obviously phony talent scout this nightclub handyman says gave Lola Lalana her last audition.
From off camera, another voice says, "Batman, you're getting warm."
From the shadows, a familiar voice.
And a familiar face. A young man with red hair, a little streak of white at the front, who Batman identifies as
Lieutenant Jim Corrigan. What brings my old friend and New York's toughest cop to our not-so-fair city?
Corrigan takes a draw of his cigarette and replies, "The trail of John T. Weaver, salesman and strangler."
Weaver? The suspect in the Jennings case?
Asks Commissioner Gordon. Corrigan replies, "Weaver's not his real name, but on a sales trip to New York he committed a strangling homicide and I tracked him here. Yeah, a solid citizen, but also something weird and different."
What are you getting at, Corrigan?
Ever hear of the Thugs, you two?
Of course. They're a secret band of assassins in old India, from which we get our modern word thug for killer or criminal. As I recall, the British Army wiped them out in the 1830s by executing most of them.
What we see in this panel is always a little flashback in Batman's mind showing a couple of guys being put to death by firing squad. We're back in the present. The next panel as Batman continues.
The thugs worshipped Kali, the goddess of destruction, and their victims, always slain by strangling, were sacrifices to her.
"Go to head of the class, Batman," says Corrigan. "Well, the thugs are operating here now in the good old US of A. They'll start to take the leave from the nightclub in the next panel with Batman saying,
Hold it, Jim. I've a hunch these murders are connected, but all our suspects are Americans, not long-dead characters in turbans.
But they're all committed with slip knots, just like the thugs always used, and they have no known motives, right? And what makes a solid citizen turn assassin unless it's a different way out motive, like ritual sacrifice?" Commissioner Gordon's slightly appalled at this. He says,
What? If you're such a hot detective, Corrigan, lead us to Weaver, and we'll test your crazy theory.
Commissioner Gordon gets into his car. We can see in the background a sign, sadly, that references Lola and her scarf dance in the nightclub. That's a shame. Still with a cigarette in hand, Corrigan replies to Commissioner Gordon, saying, I'm afraid I lost his trail when he came to Gotham City.
Some sleuth. Guess that Batman and I'll have to catch the real killers, whoever they are.
And we can see that Batman is also going to the car with Commissioner Gordon, and it moves off, with Commissioner Gordon saying in the first panel of page 6,
Thugs, goddess, ritual murders.
As he laughs, Batman broods and thinks,
Gordon can laugh, but he doesn't know Corrigan's really the Spectre, and that amazing spook has rarely been wrong.
You're so right, Batman. For now, as Lieutenant Jim Corrigan strolls down the deserted street.
Yes, we see Jim moseying along. You can take a drink, listeners, because there's a dustbin in this panel. We can see a newspaper poking out the top. We can read the headline that says, Funeral today for strangling victim. Corrigan sees the newspaper and thinks, that headline, it's my invitation to a burial, but not as Jim Corrigan, visiting cop from out of town. Better make the grim graveyard scene in a more fitting form, as the Spectre. And with that, he transforms into his ghostly form and flies off.
The Spectre, that awesome avenger of evil. In reality, Jim Corrigan is a walking dead man, battling crime as a grisly ghost with powers beyond those of mortal men.
We see the Spectre in the next panel sort of descending over a cemetery. We can see the funeral party on the hill ahead of him. As he floats over the gate, he's thinking, a nice warm grave. I yearn for its everlasting peace, but evil will not allow me my rightful rest.
Making himself invisible, the Spectre observes the mourners.
Yes, we see him looking down. A couple of men, one with a moustache and a smart suit, another guy in a purple suit. Everyone looks very respectful. The Spectre thinks, everyone looks properly sad. Could my instinct be wrong?
But as the mourners depart and the gravediggers complete their grim task...
The Spectre, still invisible and still hovering, spots another figure beside an outbuilding in the cemetery. As he spots him, the Spectre thinks, who's that by the cemetery tool shed? It's him, Weaver, and he's stealing a pickaxe.
And we prophesy even more chilling events in Part 2, next.
Top of page 7, indeed there's a caption that says Part 2, and the next chapter title is...
The Tooth of Kali.
Caption for the first panel on page 7 reads,
Becoming visible, the Spectre confronts his flesh and blood quarry.
Yes, he appears in front of Weaver, who still looks like Manhunter 2070, now wearing a brown leather jacket, and Weaver says,
Who? What? This cemetery has me seeing things.
No, foul assassin, I do exist.
Then I'll end your existence. So...
And with that, Weaver takes a futile swing at the Spectre with his pickaxe.
It's not possible. The pick passed right through you.
In the land beyond the living, all things are possible, says the Spectre, and as he says that, there's a burst of gold energy and the pickaxe dissolves in Weaver's hands. Weaver ducks behind a tombstone which is a cross at the top, yelling,
No! Stay away! Stay away!
You think that tombstone will protect you from me? Ha 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 ha! The Spectre laughs, and then we suddenly see that Weaver's hands have become wedged inside the form of the tombstone. He screams,
I'm trapped!
In the next panel, we see the Spectre thinking, and while he wonders at his fate, I shall regain my corporeal form. And we see the shape of Jim Corrigan start to appear. A slow dissolve. First caption, top of page 8.
A little later...
Commissioner Gordon and Batman in Commissioner Gordon's office, and Jim Corrigan arrives at the doorway saying, Delivered. One salesman turned assassin. Commissioner Gordon exclaims,
But, blazes, it's him, Weaver. He fits the wanted description.
To which Weaver exclaims,
This is an outrage. My name's Henry Barnes, and I live at 56 Windermere Street.
As Commissioner Gordon and another officer sit Weaver in a chair, Batman, who's present as I said, and Corrigan stand separately, away from them, in a corner of the room, as Batman very indiscreetly says,
Nice work, Spectre. I mean, Jim. How'd you do it?
Well, that was nearly a bit of a giveaway, wasn't it, viewers? Corrigan replies, I haunted Jennings' funeral, and sure enough, Weaver showed up to steal a pickaxe.
A pickaxe?
In the old thuggy ritual, the pickaxe represented the tooth of Kali, their evil goddess, and was consecrated in a special ceremony after the victim's grave was dug with it. You need any more proof they were up against a modern bunch of those crazy killers, Batman?
I admit it's persuasive. If Weaver really is a thuggy strangler, Gordon will get it out of him.
But as the long interrogation goes on...
Yes, we see Commissioner Gordon's taken off his smart purple jacket. He seems to be mopping his brow. They've obviously been there for quite a long time. He's saying,
Maybe I'm losing my touch, but I can't shake his story, and We've checked his ID. He really is Henry Barnes and lives at 56 Windermere Street with his wife and kids.
Corrigan says in the next panel, sure, but in his Weaver alias he's a killer. Stealing that pickaxe proves it.
He claims he never was at Jennings' funeral, and how come you can't produce the pick as evidence? Some detective.
In the first panel of page 9, Corrigan looks very moody indeed. We can see in the background that Weaver's being hooked up to some kind of machinery, and in the foreground Jim is saying, how can I tell Gordon that the Spectre overdid it and destroyed the evidence? To which Batman says,
Easy, Jim. The lie detector test should clear up things.
However, in the next panel, Commissioner Gordon proclaims,
clean. He passed the test with flying colours.
To which Corrigan says, lie detector tests aren't 100% accurate. Jennings' secretary, she'll identify him in a police lineup. I'll bet my badge on it.
Shortly.
Yep, we can see that Weaver and a couple of other shifty-looking lads, none of whom look anything like him, it must be said. Surely the whole point is that you get people that look, like, I don't know. I've never been in a police lineup. Listeners, have you ever been in a police lineup? Write in and let us know. Peter will give you the address at the end of the episode. Yes, we see usual suspect styley, Weaver lined up, and Jennings' secretary is sat there, and she turns to Commissioner Gordon, and she points at the very tall man in a blue blazer that's standing next to Weaver and says, that's the man. I'm positive. And this prompts Gordon to say,
there goes your whole case, Corrigan. She picked out one of her own detectives.
What? She's wrong. Mixed up. I'm positive he's the killer. And some kind of modern master of thuggy murder. Corrigan looks enraged in the next panel as he rushes forward and grabs Weaver, or is it Barnes, by the collar of his jacket and says, I'll shake the truth out of you. Confess, you lousy killer. To which Batman says,
Corrigan, stop.
Gordon then points at Jim in the next panel saying,
Corrigan, I've had enough of your crazy meddling. Stay out of our way or I'll ship your tail back to New York.
Okay, Commissioner, but a band of stranglers is roaming Gotham looking for more victims. You'll see.
Shortly.
Batman and Commissioner Gordon looking out the window, we can see Weaver walking along the pavement away from them. Gordon says,
he's a free man. We've nothing to hold him on.
But we still have 3 unsolved stranglings and no leads.
Another slow dissolve and another caption.
Not long after.
Yes, we see Batman walking along the pavement in plain sight, approaching the door of the Gotham City morgue. As he opens the door, he's thinking,
Corrigan's thuggy theory does seem discredited, so I'll have to start over by doing some routine detective work.
The next panel, we can see that Batman is obviously talking to some sort of Gordy the Ghoul type figure. We can see the drawers in the morgue. He's holding a piece of paper, and Batman's already taking his leave as the morgue attendant is saying,
you want to see Lola Lalana's body, Batman? Why, her brother just came and took it away. See, here's the legal permits.
Batman not having it, as I said, marches off, cape blowing behind him, saying,
It's a phony. She had no next of kin.
A moment later.
Batman has left the morgue and he's walking towards a proper 70s Batmobile. Amazing!
Yay.
When was the last time we had a proper 70s Batmobile in a story? It's been ages. It never seems to happen in a Brave and Bold because he's usually cutting about a desert somewhere in the middle of nowhere. As Batman walks towards his car, he sees another very 70s looking van pulling away, and he thinks,
that panel truck. Gotta trail it.
Now a grim pursuit begins across Gotham's traffic-choked streets and on out into the countryside.
Yes, the final panel of page 10, we see the Batmobile conspicuously close to the van, following it, and then in the first panel of page 11, we've reached a lovely little shady tree-filled grove. We can see the Batmobile parked, and Batman is trying to hide in plain sight behind some trees as he sees the van, and he thinks,
he stopped in that field. Good Lord. From the nightclub handyman's description, that's Valentine, the fake talent scout, and he's digging a grave?
Yes, we can see that if this is Valentine, he's parked his van, he's got out, he's got a pickaxe. Take a drink every time you see a pickaxe in the podcast from now on, listeners. He's also got a spade and he's digging a hole. He looks up as Batman yells,
all right, Buster.
But then Valentine pulls a pistol and fires 3 shots at Bats in the next panel as Batman thinks,
a gun. I didn't figure.
Caught at point-blank range, the Batman seems a goner, but...
Yes, well, with a weird sort of almost white aura, suddenly the bullets that were about to strike Batman have gone and they've been replaced by, well, very helpfully, Valentine thinks...
Huh? Butterflies, not bullets.
Valentine screams. As a familiar ghostly guardian appears on the scene, gestures, and Valentine's gun transforms into a spider. Batman, on seeing his colleague, yells,
Spectre!
The first panel of page 12, Batman has got a hold of Valentine, got his arms behind his back, and he says,
I've got him now. Thanks, but How?
I suspected he'd attempt something like this, so I watched the morgue. They couldn't risk stealing a pickaxe from a real funeral again, hence this informal burial here, to make sure of obtaining a tooth of Kali for consecration at their vile rites. And the Spectre gestures, the pickaxe lifts out of the ground, floats into the air. Batman grabs it in panel 3 as the Spectre says, "Now, Batman, surely you have enough hard evidence to convince that doubting minion of the law, Gordon."
You bet, Spectre.
Worth pointing out that Valentine's eyes are wide and terrified in this panel. Another slow dissolve.
Some time later...
Yeah, we're back at Gotham City Police Headquarters. Commissioner Gordon, with a pipe in his gob, is saying,
Blast it, Batman. I know he stole the girl's body, but like Weaver, he won't crack. He beat the lie detector test too, and he claimed he's really James Wilson, a respected citizen.
Yes, as the Commissioner's talking to Batman, we can see who we thought was Valentine, but we now know was Wilson, sat in a chair behind, linked up to the lie detector. In panel 5, we can see the Spectre hovering outside the window as Batman goes through, obviously, a folder of some paperwork. As he's looking through it, he's saying,
But now I'm positive Corrigan was right. That somehow they're really thuggy stranglers. If we could just find a connection between them.
Batman suddenly throws the paperwork up into the air and walks off saying,
I found it. Weaver and Valentine were both in the same army outfit during the war.
To which the Commissioner says,
Huh? So what?
But we don't get an immediate answer. We get a slow dissolve. We arrive at the top of page 13. A caption reads,
Shortly...
Batman is approaching a large building, top of some steps that bears the legend, Armory. As he approaches, he's thinking,
This is a long shot, but who knows when and whom the Stranglers will strike next.
In the next panel, he's made his way into the armory. He's going through a filing cabinet. We can see a folder which is labelled The Dirty Dozers. Obviously, there's an apostrophe in front of the D, which suggests it's an abbreviation of some kind. Batman's going through the folder, but sadly...
It's empty.
We should have expected that, Batman.
Spectre?
Spec is floating down from the ceiling, saying, Stolen no doubt to cover a modern thuggie's tracks. But this thievery proves we are on the right track at last.
But who in blazes were the Dirty Dozers?
Well, they actually supported menswear at the Birmingham Foundry in 1996, but that's not important right now. Batman closes the filing cabinet, and amusingly, both caped heroes walk out of the armory in the next panel. I love the fact that they're just casually strolling. Spectre is saying, Weaver and Valentine were obviously members, but I doubt either would tell us much.
Maybe, but Valentine's still in police custody. I'm gonna make him talk, no matter what.
Not long after, in the quiet home of Henry Barnes, travelling salesman, alias John T. Weaver, Strangler.
Yes, we can see that Weaver, or Barnes, is reading a copy of the Gotham Gazette, headline reading, Stranglings Still Unsolved. Behind him, unseen, the Spectre phases through the wall and grabs a photograph in a frame from the sideboard, thinking, This, perhaps it is the key to unlocking evil's door.
And as the unseen spectral sleuth vanishes, what awaits in part 3 next?
We arrive for part 3 at the top of page 14, and a caption chapter title thing that reads,
Part 3,
Judgment of a
a
Goddess.
Goddess.
The first caption for the story in page 14 reads,
In Gotham City Police Headquarters, a man who has broken 1,000 criminal foes confesses defeat.
Yeah, Batman's talking to Commissioner Gordon. Batman's saying,
I couldn't get a peep out of him. It's as if, as Wilson, a good and ordinary citizen, he has no knowledge or memory of his other identity, Valentine the Killer.
Off camera, another voice says, Exactly, but maybe this will help,
Corrigan, I told you to stay out of this.
says Commissioner Gordon, pointing at Jim, who's just arrived in the doorway, and Jim is holding that framed photograph in his hand, and he says, I know, Commissioner, but once in a case, my flat feet just keep following up clues. And he hands the photograph to Batman, who looks at it and says,
Jim, you've done it. This photo, it's them, the Dirty Dozers.
Yes, we see a bunch of armed military men. We can see a bulldozer to the left, another bit of equipment to the right. They're all sort of standing around or sitting around smiling, obviously taken during wartime. It's been signed by someone that says the Dirty Dozers, Fanzigar, 1944. Commissioner Gordon is throwing his hands up. I'm not sure if it's in dismay or exultation in the next panel, but Corrigan continues saying, Yep, a big group of army engineers doing special jobs in the CBI theatre. If you look real close, you'll recognise our pals, Weaver and Valentine. And there's a little asterisk there at CBI theatre, and a caption reads,
Editor's note, during World War II, the China-Burma-India combat area was known as the CBI.
I didn't know that, did you?
Yes, because I've listened to the latest episode of the Weird Warriors podcast.
Oh, really?
Oh!
Yeah, and Rich talks about that in that very episode.
Oh, wow. That's quite interesting. Was that just out today?
The one that came out today, yes.
Yeah, God, I haven't listened to it yet because I was still finishing off the episode of Pieces of Eight that Kerry put out the other day before releasing another one today. I've not even started today's Talkville either. But anyway, Steve, did you know of the CBI?
No. News to me.
Cool. Excellent. There we go. Peter had us at a disadvantage because he doesn't listen to as many podcasts as I do. Anyway, in the next panel, out of sight, a hope of Commissioner Gordon, Corrigan quickly transforms into the Spectre and phases out through the wall, prompting Batman to say,
Where are you going?
No time to tell you, friend. Farewell for now.
A moment later...
Commissioner Gordon comes back into the room saying,
So, that meddling Corrigan's gone, eh? Good. We'll crack these stranglings without him, Batman.
I don't think Commissioner Gordon likes Jim Corrigan very much. We arrive at the top of page 15.
Within moments, halfway around the world, a phantom form arrives at a dusty, desolate spot, somewhere in northern India.
Yes, we see the Spectre hovering with his cape blowing behind him. Great image, actually. This looks like it's just been traced out of one of the Neil Adams issues. Frankly, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. The Spectre's looking at a rock which has written on it Fanzigar. There's also what looks like some native language underneath, but there's also a plaque. Spectre takes all this in and thinks, Fanzigar, this is the place. We get a closer look at the plaque in the next panel, which reads,
This road was built in record time by the Dirty Dozers, U.S. Army Engineer Corps, June 1944.
And the Spectre reads this and thinks, a few words, but what a tale they tell. The next panel is definitely going on the socials. It's a cracker, and it's captioned,
Concentrating his unique powers, the awesome Avenger now bridges the chasm of time itself, gazing back to one day many years before.
Yeah, this is sublime. We see the Spectre's POV almost, and we can see a bunch of army bulldozers just sort of making their way across the terrain. In the next panel is obviously a local gentleman who's not too happy about their presence. He gets in the road of them and cries, Sahibs, do not ride your monstrous machines into the cemetery. It is sacred to Kali. And as he says this, he gestures, and we can see a number of tomb and gravestones and monuments all ranged behind them. But the soldier driving the bulldozer doesn't seem interested. He says,
Sorry, old-timer, but a road's got to go right through it to help win the war.
In the next panel, we see that first bulldozer knocking over the first couple of gravestones and monuments. One of the guys inside it says,
Hey, I feel something funny.
and this prompts one of the other soldiers and one of the other dozers to yell,
You nuts. Keep going. We got a road to build.
and we then arrive at the top of page 16. Take a drink. There's a full moon with a Batman in front of it and a caption that reads,
Meanwhile, half a world away in Gotham City...
Yes, Bats is crouched on a rooftop, looking pretty badass, it must be said, and he's keeping an eye on what's going on down below and thinking,
Valentine, alias Wilson. I had Gordon release him so I could secretly tail him.
Yes, and we see Valentine down on the street, cut about in a blue suit with his weird face that looks like he's been hit by a shovel. Some nice detailing here, actually. In the foreground, we can see a gentleman wearing dark glasses and a hat, holding a cup in front of him with some pencils in it, and he must have a sign around his neck that reads, I am blind. That's fascinating. Nice little extra work there from Mr. Aparo. What a master. We move to some insert panels, and the caption reads,
And shortly...
Yes, Batman has followed Valentine into a building. We see Valentine entering a lift by the looks of things, and there's a sign beside the lift which looks as though it says 40th floor, Dirty Dozers Reunion, private. Batman takes all this in and thinks,
What luck. He led me straight to his old outfit's get-together.
Soon, 40 floors above, the nighttime streets...
The nighttime streets, of course, supported menswear at the Reading TUC. Right, Batman is outside looking in. I hope he's holding on tight if he's on the 40th floor. We can see him looking through the window, and we can see a bunch of men sat around a table. They've got some drinks in front of them, some munchies, some of them are smoking. Bat's looking in the window and he's thinking,
It's them. All the survivors of the Dirty Dozers. So far, it's like all other reunions of old vets. Could Spectre and I be wrong about all this?
But as the night deepens and a nearby clock strikes...
Yes, we see Valentine, and he's holding a particular instrument in his hand, and Bats helpfully thinks,
Valentine. He's got the pickaxe we let him steal back from police headquarters.
And as the lights dim and a curtain is pulled aside at one end of the suite...
Yes, the curtain is pulled aside and we see the four-armed statue of Kali. In one hand there's a skull, in two hands there's knives, blades, whatever you want to call them, swords. The other hand seems to be holding some kind of bowl. There's a brazier in front with a flame burning, and we hear the voices of all the Dirty Dozers chanting,
Kali, 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 Kali.
And then we're back with Valentine holding the pickaxe up in front of him, saying,
"O goddess, we offer for consecration this sacred tooth from the grave of a sacrificial victim."
Bats is outside. He looks alarmed and deep in thought as he thinks,
Incredible. They're all suddenly transfixed, worshipping that statue. Spectre was sure right.
But with the lights dimmed, the rising moon casts Batman's telltale shadow on the rug.
And that's what we see indeed. Through the window we see Batman's shadow, because the dafty wasn't taking proper care. One of the Dirty Dozers spots him and yells,
"A spy!" Trapped on the narrow ledge, the masked manhunter is unable to react before...
Yes, with a crash, a pair of hands smash through the window and grab Batman by the throat. A full moon looms in the background as Batman thinks,
Ah, he's got me.
The next instant, Batman is pulled into the room.
Yep, the man in the purple suit that's grabbed him by the throat has pulled him in, and it looks as though he's slipped a cord around Batman's throat. Batman struggles to get free, thinking,
He's got demonic power. Can't shake him.
And in panel 2 we see that Batman seems to be passing out. There's little bursts of light around his head. We can see the hands of the man holding the cord gripping with emphasis. The caption reads,
Tighter and tighter twist the hands of death. The Batman is certain this is his life's end. When
off camera a voice yells,
Stop! I command it!
And the man in purple, who might well be Valentine, it's not too clear because Valentine was wearing a blue suit earlier, but anyway, this member of the Dirty Dozers looks up and drops Batman, saying,
Kali, she moves!
Yes, we see the Kali statue surrounded by golden energy, and she suddenly seems to be astride a tiger. Oh my goodness! She points at this member of the Dirty Dozers and yells,
Free the victim! I, your goddess, command it! There have been enough sacrifices! I release you from your sacred killing, forever!
In a blaze of yellow light, the half-conscious Batman feels himself lightly lifted and carried away.
And we see the Kali statue, with Batman sat on the tiger behind her, phasing through the wall, leaving, as the members of the Dirty Dozers look on.
The Caped Crusader is only aware of a brief passage of time, and then...
We see Batman rubbing his throat as he thinks out loud,
Where am I?
And before Batman and our eyes, the form of Kali and the tiger changes into someone else. Batman exclaims,
Spectre? You?
Yes, and you are safe. Kali having commanded them, those veterans will never again be bewitched into ritual murder. And we see that Bats and the Spectre are standing outside the reunion. We can see the sign on the door that says, Suite 400, Dirty Dozers Reunion Private. Batman then says,
But what got them started in the first place?
The next panel is a flashback, narrated by the Spectre, who says, During the war, when the Dirty Dozers disturbed the burial place of long ago executed thugs, the released spirits of those evil stranglers entered the young soldiers' innocent souls. And we see the bulldozers clanking away and knocking over the tombstones and grave markers, and little golden bursts of energy rising out the graves and entering the bodies of the soldiers. That's obviously what the soldiers were talking about. They said they felt something funny. We're back in the present as Batman says,
Then none of them really was aware of what possessed them? Or what they did?
And a very moody Spectre replies, Exactly. It is a trick of malignant fate, playing itself out years later, here in America.
But innocent victims died. And in there are the men who caused those deaths, no matter how innocently.
With that, the Spectre shifts back into Corrigan, saying, Yes, and men who will now have to be told the most devastating news mere mortals have perhaps ever heard. Come. And a slow dissolve, we arrive at the final page of the story.
Sometime later, a group of men, their faces like tragic masks, wait outside a closed door.
Yes, we see who we thought were Weaver and Valentine, but actually the soldiers sitting looking very thoughtful. And then we see Corrigan standing with who we thought was Valentine, and Batman. Valentine is saying,
I was the outfit's wartime commander. We're ready to face justice.
To which Batman says,
Trust in the court's mercy. Not all of you committed crimes, and we know even for those who did, the circumstances are incredibly unusual.
The door they're all sat outside opens. A woman dressed in green black hair, obviously a member of the legal staff, announces, "Gentlemen, the district attorney will see you now." Valentine cries,
"Dirty dozers, fall in! Forward, march!"
and they all stand and make their way into the room, and we arrive at the caption for the final panel.
And as the line of aging heroes marches to meet their fate, 2 other comrades depart from the great courthouse.
Yeah, see Jim Corrigan and Batman taking their leave. We see the statue of the Lady of Justice with her scales, their blindfold and all that in front of them. Corrigan is saying, "As the Spectre, I know evil, like Kelly's power, never dies. The battle against it is never over."
Yes, Jim, but in this case, it's that other goddess over there who will have the last word.
Batman indicating the statue as a tiny caption reads,
The end.
Right. The first things to sort of talk about here, Batman refers to his old friend Jim Corrigan.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a look back at Brave and Bold issue 75 before we started recording. And in the pages of that story, Batman only meets the Spectre. He doesn't meet Jim Corrigan, but Commissioner Gordon does have a few scenes with him at the start.
Right.
And it's obvious throughout the story that Batman is fully aware that Jim Corrigan is the Spectre. Discuss.
In the Death of the Spectre story from Justice League, there was Batman involved in that story. I can't remember.
He's on the cover.
Right.
But I think that was just for sales, really. I think it's just Johnny Thunder and Dr. Fate and Thunderbolt that are there when the Spectre gets summoned and then they'll fly off.
Yeah, it's all the JSAs at the end, yeah.
I don't think Batman of Earth 1 was around for that.
But was he maybe present for discussion when they mentioned Jim Corrigan? Because the obvious familiarity between Batman and Corrigan and the Spectre here kind of implies that they've had adventures together before.
Yeah, very much so.
Untold adventures.
Yeah.
Maybe the Flash told him all about him after he met his good friend in Phantom Flash Cosmic Traitor.
Remember when the Spectre died in issue 83, Green Arrow was really cut up about it.
Yes,
remember?
That's right,
Despite them never having shared any dialogue in any stories at that point.
Of course.
Right. Flicking back through JLA in 82 and 83, there is one scene with the Earth 2 Batman in the presence of the Spectre. Mm-hmm. Of course, by the time of the next chapter, the Spectre has been locked into his tomb, and Batman of Earth 1 basically spends the whole story sort of out of things because he's been wrapped up in those tendrils and taken out at the same time as Dr. Midnight has.
Of course.
So he's not around for any of the rest of it at all. The Spectre's just out in space with Johnny and Dr. Fate, and that's it. I think there has to have been some kind of unseen adventure, I think.
At least one, yes.
No, yeah, I'm very surprised that they haven't had those interactions. You would think that Batman would interact with, a police detective from another city. That we haven't seen that on panel, in an actual issue at some point. Actually, is pretty surprising to me. Probably surprised Bob Haney too, I guess.
Well, that's the thing. It's that thing that we've found many times is that
Bob Haney don't care.
Bob Haney doesn't really pay much attention to what's going on in the continuity.
Just wants to write a cracking story, that's all he wants to do.
The other thing we have to talk about here is, do we think this is the same version of the Spectre that we've currently been reading about in Adventure Comics?
Well, I don't see how it can be, considering we've got the whole Clark Kent is known as Superman in the Adventure Comics that you've covered. I wasn't present for, but I have listened to. So.
Yes, that's because you had laryngitis, my love, and we're trying to take some of the pressure off you by not having you talk as much.
So, again, it's one of these things that I think kind of mentioned before, is that, is it a case of, was there maybe a Superman story in which Superman was revealed to be Clark Kent, but it turned out to be a big hoax or a Mitch-Espitalic kind of thing, and people have just
I think you're reaching a bit there.
Yeah. Heard a rumour that Clark Kent maybe, and it's all right, okay, you've done it. No, I think that's a big stretch, but that's the only way it can really work to make the exact same one.
As we record today, Steve and I have already recorded next week's episode, and there's a little, without wanting to preempt it too much, there's a little aspect in that one caption where we sort of talk about which led us to sort of note there was quite a lot of contrary information given about which Spectre we might be experiencing or what stories, it's...
Yeah, in the letter calls, they have pretty firmly stated that it was Earth 1, but I don't see how that's possible.
Yeah.
And in particular, in this issue, I feel like the characterization of the Spectre is not in line with the characterization in Adventure in the slightest.
Yep.
In particular, at the end, the Spectre seems to be kind of forgiving of these guys for what they've done, whereas Batman is the one who's the harder line and is like, they need to be brought to justice. And Spectre's like, yeah, but was it really their fault?
Yeah, because what you'd expect from reading the Adventure comics is for the Spectre in the form of Kali to slice them all up using his swords, or to grab the pickaxe and chop them all to bits. So that is very surprising, especially, you know, because I say Steve and I are doing a couple more Spectre stories in next week's episode, and they have just as, you know, violent sort of climaxes as all the other ones that we've done. Thankfully, no one was eaten by a giant squid in this issue of Brave and Bold. No, I think it's a great point, Steve. It doesn't feel like it's the Spectre from Adventure Comics at all.
No.
I'm prepared at this point to sort of say that in Brave and Bold, because it's the comic that features Batman, who's ostensibly the lead, it's ostensibly the main Batman, so it's ostensibly Earth 1. I'm prepared to accept that this is a version of the Spectre on Earth 1, and to just continue with our conjecture that the Spectre in the Adventure comics, which we've said a couple of times in the past, I think, is in a separate continuity of his own and not really part of the main DCU at all.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yep, logical, makes sense.
Well, glad that's all sorted out. The cover, obviously, is completely inaccurate.
I was about to say exactly the same thing.
Logopolis.
I love that scene.
At no point does the statue grab Batman.
Apart from to rescue him, to take him away. Not to stab him.
Yeah. It would have been pretty cool if it all had been a bit more supernatural and the statue had come to life and grabbed Batman and the Spectre had to rescue him and fight it and all that sort of stuff. I was just miming fighting for the benefit of our YouTube viewers.
With 4 arms, ladies and gentlemen. 4 arms. Well done.
Yes, I know. Yeah, I'm really quite surprised at how sedate and normal and restrained the climax of the story was.
Yeah. And the fact they've got new identities, that's a bit peculiar. When they set up with new identities after the war, is that something they instigated, or the other spiritual personalities? Did they force them to create new identities? Or are they secret undercover agents now? Or?
Well, yeah, I mean, they seem to be aliases because when they're investigated and quizzed on the lie detector, they just give their own regular names and addresses, and then they're found. So are they just giving false names just to add a bit of narrative complexity, or because they're trying to stay hidden? And I don't know, that one's not very clear. Yeah,
maybe they're given new identities after the war, and perhaps the entities that possessed them kind of blocked off memories of what they'd done in their previous identities, but that's a big reach.
Are you saying then that in the case of Weaver then, that Barnes is his real name or Weaver is his real name? Which one are you saying, that Barnes is the new identity and Weaver is who he maybe is?
Yeah, Barnes is the new identity, so yeah, they were all given new IDs.
All right.
Like witness protection style, but you know, it's a bit...
By whom?
By the US government, perhaps, knowing that they'd done.
Why?
Because they had desecrated. I don't know.
Well, I think
as I said, it's a big reach.
Yes, it's an incredibly big reach. I think all they'd have been worried about in World War II was the road getting built. They probably weren't too fussed about what they demolished to get to it.
That's why it's a big reach.
Well, it also makes me wonder why 30 years from now? Why it's been 30 years since the war, and they're just now starting to strangle people. That's not really addressed.
Yeah.
But they've created these false identities, and it was like, let's let these guys, the spirits, the Kali thuggy spirits, we're like, let's get these guys back to the U.S. Let's have them create false identities. And now that they've really, really settled in, now let's have them start killing people.
Maybe this is when the cosmos came into alignment, and it could only happen at this point. Who knows?
And we didn't really establish a pattern as to why the man playing tennis or the businessman or why the exotic dancer were targeted. That all seems a bit random in retrospect as well.
Yeah.
Do you think Bob Haney just wrote one draft?
One draft Haney, there you go. That's what they call me.
Type, finished. How many pages? Right, there you go, Jim. Just draw it. Okay, Jim has a draw of his cigarette, takes a drink and starts penciling, gets it coloured, printed. And then people, it's going to be interesting to see what the letter fragments have to say about it, but we'll get to that in a little while. Steve, you said you made copious notes. Anything you want to raise?
Quite a few things, but we don't have to get to them all. I did want to talk about the characterization of Jim Gordon in this.
Yes.
Because our two Jims are at odds with each other, and he's just like, get this guy out of here. I don't want this guy here.
Yeah. Commissioner Gordon didn't seem to be having a good day at all, did he?
No.
For someone who's very happy to receive help in the form of a certain caped crusader, this guy, no, we don't want this guy around. I've already got somebody helping me out. And Batman, really all he does in this episode is kind of hang out in Gordon's office.
Yes. Yes.
Several times, Corrigan comes in and Batman's just kind of hanging out. He's like, so, Jim, how have things been lately?
Maybe he thinks there's only room for one chain-smoking Jim detective in his city. So
The chain-smoking gym detectives, of course, supported the Montrose Avenue at Manchester Uni in 1997 to batter that joke further to death. No, that's fair.
The funny note to do with Jim Gordon's characterization being when Jim Corrigan transforms into the Spectre in the same room as Jim Gordon. And just, whoosh, I'm going to fly through the wall now. And Gordon's like, doo-doo-doo.
Yeah.
some Detective Gordon is.
It's no wonder that it's so easy for Batman to, like, disappear on Gordon in all those various issues.
Yes.
Because Gordon's apparently completely oblivious every time his back's turned.
Or is he? Maybe he heard Batman say, Spectre, sorry, Jim, good to see you.
Yes, that bit was terrible. You'd expect Corrigan to sort of say, "Hang on, secret identity here, mate." Yeah.
You know, we talked about the lovely 70s Batmobile in this, which is
yes.
probably my favorite Batmobile, actually, of all of them.
It's very much definitely mine.
My favourite Batmobile is when it looks as close to just like a souped-up sports car as possible.
Yeah.
You know, just like something that you could drive past you in the street and you might not notice it. You know, you might think it's a bit flashy or whatever, but you know, it's not something that should be majorly conspicuous. It should be a covert vehicle of the night.
Yeah. Yeah, as opposed to a giant tumbler.
Yeah, it's a bit more discreet, isn't it, as opposed to the TV series version for a start. Yeah. I think that's why I like it the most, actually.
None of the 8 million souls of Gotham City are going to notice.
Gotham City, 8 million people, down to 7,999,999.
All of them looking in the other direction. You know, honestly, I want justice for the victims. I want to know why they were attacked in the first place. It's also random as, like, you know... But then the thing is, there's the bit when Batman goes to speak to Gordy the Ghoul and her brother came and took away, and it's, you know, it's a phony, of course, because it was probably going to be another... That's probably the grave that Valentine was digging on page 11. He was probably digging a grave to put Lola's body in, now that I think about it, because... now that I look back at page 11, panel 2, there is what looks like I just thought it was the floor of the van, but it looks like it could be a casket that's in the back. So that's obviously why Batman was following them. I didn't even grasp that that's why he was following them. Goodness me. Oh dear, sorry listeners, I dropped the ball with that one.
I do like that Batman does seem to know the family history of all the exotic dancers in Gotham City.
Of course he does. Of course he does. That's Bruce Wayne for you, isn't it?
I must keep up this Playboy facade. Yes.
Exactly. Anything that we want to sort of conclude on before we move on to the letters?
The only other thing I really want to say is this is so 70s, it's unreal. It's fantastic. It's so 70s cop show drama. It looks brilliant.
Yes.
And Corrigan's chain smoking in pretty much every panel that he's in. It's fantastic. And all the Dutch tilts, all the shadows in the foreground, everything. It's brilliant. I love it. Apparel storytelling's phenomenal.
That's a good point, what you're saying about it being the early 70s, because for the soldiers, the ex-soldiers all to be the age that they are. And to do this story at all, you know, if they'd left it any further, they probably would have been too old to do everything expected. You know, 30 years after the war, it's believable now that they're middle-aged, that, you know, having their anniversary reunion or whatever. When I'm reading it for the benefit of the podcast, I kind of miss some of the nuances because I'm sort of concentrating on telling the story. I wonder what sentence they all end up with. Are they going to take demonic possession as enough, or are they all going to get, you know, quite severe sentences for murder because that's what happened?
Yeah. Well, demonic possession is 9/10 of the law, so
they're painted at the end as being very noble. As they walk into to see the district attorney, but, you know, they did kill some people. Yeah. And they're obviously aware that they did it, and it's a little unsatisfying, I think, in a way.
It's weird as well, because it's all of them that go in, so have all of them killed someone, or are they just, like, complicit in it?
It's possible. Yeah, I think it's because they're all involved. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Batman even says, not all of you committed crimes.
Conspiracy to murder, I suppose, yeah.
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 I'm pretty sure, David, that you are. Peter, are you a fan of Astro City?
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah. There's an issue early in the run, I seem to recall, where they kind of address what it would be like to be a lawyer in the superhero world to live in a world where a legitimate defense to being accused of a crime is, I didn't do it, my evil twin did.
Yeah.
Sure.
I was thinking of that story when these guys were marching into, how do you as a judge say, okay, what? You were possessed?
Yeah.
Batman's here and he's assuring me that that's the case, that you all were possessed?
Yeah.
I don't know how to handle this. Is there legal precedent?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I mean, you'd think obviously legal processes and legal systems in a reality where superheroes are the norm.
Yeah.
And spooky things happen like this, there probably is a precedent for dealing with it. It's very interesting.
Probably have to call in Zatanna or someone as a witness.
Probably, yeah. Or maybe even a Spectre. Not a lot of answers then to a lot of our speculation. Shall we move on to the contemporary correspondence then?
Let's do so.
Sure can.
So once again, at this point, listeners, the Brave and Bold doesn't really have a letters page in the same way as everyone else does. It prints little chunks and fragments and bits out of people's letters. So there's some relevant correspondence in Brave and Bold issue 119 and a little bit more in issue 120. Peter's going to talk us through 119.
And this comment's from Matthew O'Bannon, Louisville, Kentucky. We, who are at one time or another knee-deep in comics, with an X, find ourselves entangled in fantasies of vast potential. Insofar as team-ups are concerned, particularly in the hands of an artist of Apparo's magnitude, the mental agitation is often magnified. Unfortunately, it's impossible for the editor to accept every suggestion. Let's face it, Brave and Bold is here to make money. If Wildcat and the Spectre still sell, they're used. The re-emergence of antique aces, though such may be the best in the medium, is not the goal of any profit-orientated magazine. I don't particularly care to hear such a statement, but it's a fact, and understandable. And then a direct comment about B&B 116. The Spectre is presented because he's currently a popular character, because he can boost B&B's sales, and because Joe Orlando wants to give him his own magazine. Haney's basic plot was interesting. A selling plot, but he refuses to examine the work of either predecessors or peers. Despite unavoidable pop themes, that is the only problem Haney Bolton-off products have. A sort of self-contained snobbishness that wreaks havoc with continuity. If I was capable of overlooking this discrepancy, I would have better enjoyed a good story with some of the best Aparo art I've yet to have the pleasure of seeing. And the editor's note says, why do we avoid the Earth 1/2 theme? Simply to make our stories clear and concise for readers unfamiliar with that device, initiated years ago to satisfy the time paradox.
Interesting.
If we can offer an entertaining story, minus that expedient, we find comfort in knowing we've achieved our purpose. Entertainment. That's the name of the game. Not employing convenient nitty-gritty gimmicks. There we are. So that's the commentary there. Start your petition about Earth B right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite interesting because they're basically saying, well, we don't care, it doesn't matter. All we're really concerned with is telling a good story, which is quite healthy, I think, because I think, it's the sort of thing, and I'm sure we'll see a lot of this in the future, when the preoccupations of certain writers of tying up continuity and dealing with discrepancies or the real origin of the freedom fighters gets in, that's when it starts to get really messy. And rather than just, anyway.
Whereas this sort of story sparks debate like we're having now.
Of course.
Exactly.
From issue 120, which is an issue that I suggested to Peter that we end up doing.
And we shall.
Because of a reason. So it's funny because actually I posted the cover as a piece of bonus material a couple of months ago, and we're going to end up doing a story, so that's going to be interesting. Will I just reuse the same photograph, or will I take another one? You'll have to wait and see. So issue 120. Fasten your seatbelts for 116's grasp of the killer cult, rhapsodised Rob Rhodey. Somebody ought to interview the goddess Kali. Not only did she show up here, but she also appeared the same month in Ghosts. Wow, she's a busy little demon, isn't she? I liked her better here. Aparo did a magnificent job, but congratulations on a terrific story. Well, that has lain down a gauntlet. Can I find a copy of the issue of Ghosts that Kali was in and post some representative panels on the cover on the socials this week? I think I'm going to have to. One of the best was the way James Lentini put it. Chris Kerr and John Packer thought it was great, while Anthony Rivera called it the most. Haney showed the correct way to handle the Spectre, making it one of the best stories, noted Neil Robertson. What happens when two heroes are combined by two of the best storytellers? If one's talking about Batman, Spectre, Haney and Aparo, no less than a classic is produced, boomed Bill Benedict. You're going to like this, Peter. We got a little list of names here. Perry Wilson, Dan Jurgens,
Wow.
David Donovan, Sean McKinnery, Lyndon Thompson, Dan D'Angelo, Doug Bristow, Ross Ermita, and Joe Duffy.
Wow.
Joe Duffy, who, timey-wimey, Steve and I might have heard from next week.
Yes.
And Joe Duffy of Wellsdale College, no less, sang paeans of praise, while Ralph Bonacci wrote, not as fantastic as the previous story, but still great. Yet Mark Gasper tagged it as dull, Paul Frelick was disappointed, Ricky Foreman considered the plot weak, Daryl Damon said it was so-so, and someone hiding behind the signature vampire sounded off with Blech. That's the contemporary correspondence replies and thoughts on B&B 16. Dan Jurgens, is that the first mention of Dan Jurgens on the podcast?
I think
That's
it is.
quite exciting.
I read one of his early stories today, actually, from a Star Trek annual.
Interesting.
Yeah, Star Trek Annual 2. It was a really good story, yeah, it's fun. Mike Barr wrote it. Coincidence or merely chance?
I've been doing a lot of filing the last couple of days, so I've probably put some Jurgen Supermans away, if nothing else. Well, so, once again, we're not too sure which Earth that was taking place on.
Most likely Earth 1. We're going to say it's Earth 1.
I think so, by default. So at some point, obviously, either that's the Jim Corrigan of Earth 1 or the thing I hate the most, maybe the Spectre, as we did speculate in the past that after he reformed after Just League 83, that the Spectre, just basically reappeared on Earth 1, but,
Yeah.
until a story says so, we can never be sure.
Yes.
That's probably a safe spot to leave it on. Steve Higgins, thank you so much for coming back and helping us with this one.
Yay.
Thank you for having me. As always, I'm available whenever you need me. It's such fun. So thank you very much.
Yes.
And I'm just sad that I couldn't work an Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom reference into this episode somewhere. So I failed in that.
Oh, well.
But otherwise, it was a lot of fun.
Not to worry. Steve will, of course, be back with me next week for a couple more adventures with the Spectre. So you've enjoyed the Spectre this week. You'll get even more in a week's time.
Yay.
Yay.
Until then, you can get in touch with us and let us know what you thought of this story.
Yes.
Let us know what Earth you think this is taking place on. Or indeed, the Adventure Comic Spectres. Because we don't really have a definite answer. You can email us at theearth2podcast@gmail.com. Make sure you follow us on social media because, as ever, David's got some wonderful bonus material prepared for this and indeed every episode. I'm saying it, bigging you up. You're looking dubious.
I probably have. No, I have. There's a couple of foreign reprints of the issue, but I've also, since we did the Spectre's previous appearances in Brave and Bold, I've tracked down a few foreign reprints of those as well, so I'll stick them up this week. And I've got some original art, and whilst we're all monologuing away, I've gone over and dug out my corgi toy of the 1970s Batmobile, so I'll stick a photograph of that up in the socials. There was a couple of other text pages to do with the Spectre in Brave and Bold 116, so I'll put them up as well. So yes, there will be plenty.
All right.
Good.
Yeah.
On Facebook and Instagram, we're at the Earth2 Podcast, and on Twitter at podcast_Earth2, and it's the number 2 for all our social media.
It certainly is. If you're feeling generous, you could go to wherever it is you receive our podcasts and give us a review. If you feel that way, you could tell your comic-minded pals if you're enjoying the show. If you're feeling very generous, you could go to our link tree and buy Peter the price of a beverage that will get him through editing next week's episode. Steve, is there anything you want to plug at the moment?
If you want to find me, I'm on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram as VacuumBoy9. And yeah, follow me in any of those places if you'd like.
Vacuum Boy 9 was Steve's handle on the old DC Comics message boards, listeners, which is where Steve and I met 20-odd years ago.
20 years ago.
It's longer than that now. It's much longer than that. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
Amusingly, I can't remember when it was now, but one day I was sitting at work, I was still in HMV, and I was flicking through a copy, I think it was The Sun or the Daily Record, and there was a headline about a child who enjoyed hoovering. And this headline mentioned how old the child was, and genuinely it said, Vacuum Boy 9 loves to clean. And I sat there and read this and was sort of like, what? So I think I've still got it somewhere. I might post a picture of that on the socials the next time Steve's on.
I was going to say, yes.
The next time, I'm a bit short of material when Steve's involved. But what are the chances of that? What are the chances? Anyway, on that bombshell.
I've been Peter.
I've been Steve.
And I've been David. We'll see you soon on
The Earth-2 Podcast.
Transmatter cube activated. Return coordinates set for Earth Prime.
To which Weaver exclaims,
This is an outrage. Sorry. Not long after, in the quiet home of Henry Barnes, travelling salesman, alias John T. Weaver, Strangler.
John T. Weaver. A jaunty weaver stroke strangler.
I like weaving, I do. It's a lot of fun.
Holding the pickaxe up in front of him, saying,
Oh, goddess. Oh, goddess.
"Oh God!"
I should have switched the voices around. I hadn't realised it was something. Okay.
Spectre, you...
That sounded a bit more like Steve Higgins than Batman.
Yeah, it did. Sorry.
That's how shocked he is.
Remember, he's been
Spectre?
strangled, especially, so he's going to be really throaty.
Yeah. Let's get right down there. All right, here we go. Spectre. That's too much. That's a little too much. Sorry.
Sometime later, a group of men, their faces like tragic masks, wait outside a closed door.
Sometime later, a group of men from southeast England form a band that plays several gigs across central London in early 1995.
Supported by various strangely named bands. Including
The Dirty Dozers.
Yes.
Callie and the Tiger.
The Nighttime Streets.
I wish we'd written them all down. Next time someone tells me they listen to the podcast, and we say, "Do you start at the beginning and write every time I say this,
Yes.
write it down." Right. Okay.
I will give you a shout out. That's fine.
Yes.